Yeah, when I first set it up, I thought that we would be getting referrals from people themselves. I thought that that's how we'd market it and that people would see they had a need, but it's totally not that. We very rarely get somebody identifying that they themselves need help. Most of the time, it's crisis point, which is sad. Most of the time, it is they've been financially abused, maybe by a family member. Someone's taken money that shouldn't have done. We've even had situations where houses have been sold and without the person getting the money for it, and they've ended up in a social care setting. So quite often they don't realise they're being abused, or they're too ashamed to say that they're being abused.
Hello, welcome to my podcast. Today my guest is Emily Allchurch. Emily is a litigator, she's a lawyer, and she's a director of a company called Enable. And Enabled, she started 3 years ago, and it's a private company that helps the vulnerable and the elderly when they're in crisis. She's in England, but these kind of services could be put in place in anywhere, really, I'm sure. These are for, isolated people who are alone and are feeling some self-neglect, so they're not taking care of themselves the way they need to stay independent. And so her company helps people, takes them out of their crisis, deals with their finances, their health, and their community. It gives them a community to help them get back on their feet, before they lose their house, or they lose the independence that they have. Because if you lose the independence you have, you end up dependent on on social services. And part of the problem, she said, in society right now is social services is the problem, because it's not working well enough. I think we have many people that are elderly, plus the churches aren't as active as they were. People are more isolated after the pandemic. And so there's some causes of this isolation that we talked about. We talked about self-neglect. We talked about financial fraud. That is a problem largely with the elderly. People are, phoning the elderly and asking them for money, giving them opportunities that are false opportunities. We talked about that. The social care crisis, and women. We talked about women who are following careers, and what advice she had for women who are getting into their careers, and balancing professional life and motherhood, and the idea of diet and poor health. So we touched on many of those different issues. I hope that you enjoy this episode. Welcome to my podcast. Hi, Emily.
Hi, Tammy.
I think to start off, I'll just get you to explain to my listeners a typical day in your professional life, and what it looks like, and how you blend lawyer, managing, director all together.
Okay, so a typical day for me, I've got 2 businesses. So if I look at my business called Enable, a typical day might be a phone call from social services. They may have somebody that's in hospital that's been self-neglecting. They don't have anybody, no family, no relatives. They know there's a property. They know the property's not being looked after because the person's been self-neglecting, and they need some support. So we would then send somebody out, either myself or one of my colleagues would go out. We'd meet with social services and the client. We'd talk about what we need, how we can get them back home if that's what they need. If they need to go into care, we would look at what options are available for them there. We would then maybe go to the property. Sometimes that's fairly awful. We've seen some things in our time. All our cars have a supply of kind of like hazmat suits, gloves. It can be pretty horrendous when you go in there. We would then look at, maybe if they've got some clothing, because often they've ended up in hospital, they've got nothing. If there isn't anything that's not soiled, we would go out and buy them some clothes. We've got stocks back at the office of toothbrushes, general stuff. Make sure they're okay. And then we would triage it. We'd go back to the teams. We've got different teams in place for all the different areas that they might need, and we would give them all tasks. So we would onboard them. Often that means I would go into the banks and I would give them an authority so that I can then start to access their finances, get funding if needs be, apply for benefits, etc. So no 2 days are the same in Enable. We have some incredible cases. We deal with a wide variety of people. It's massively fulfilling because you are literally at the coalface making a difference to these people who have no one. A day in the legal world would be slightly different, a little bit more formal, but still it's helping people who have just lost somebody, perhaps bereaved, or who needs some support and direction in how to look after someone else that they've got attorneyship for. So it's quite varied in what I do, but it all is really fulfilling.
So, how do you define self-neglecting? If somebody was looking to refer someone, I guess that might happen because maybe the self-neglecting person isn't going to call you.
Yeah.
Who calls you and tells you about these things?
So quite often it'll be the team at the hospital. Maybe they've got someone that's
Mm-hmm.
come in, they don't even know their name. They've come in, they're in a state, a neighbour's reported them, or the police have picked them up. So that could be a referral from the team at the hospital. Sometimes it's social services, sometimes it's a bank. Quite often we find people that they would know their bank manager, they would go in and they would get help. Now where everything is automated, they walk in, there's no teller, and they're confused. They're not sure. They've been told to get some money out for someone, but they don't know why. There's a lot of fraud going on. So we might get a referral from the bank. Sometimes it's a charity. Sometimes it's a church. Basically, the more that we get the word out there that this is what we do, the more referrals we're getting from people.
I see. And so self-neglect, then how do you define that?
So it's somebody that's not looking after themselves. Quite often there'll be food in the house that's gone off. So they might get ill from eating food that's past its date. A lot of hoarding. So we find, I think, as people age, they become unsure what they need. So they will hoard things, paperwork that won't get opened because they're frightened about what might be in it. They become anxious about bills mounting up, things like that. So we find a lot of cases where they just simply put their head in the sand and have ignored everything piling up around them. Sometimes it's medication, so they haven't been taking their diabetic medication or blood pressure medication, and that would be self-neglect. And quite often they're dressed, they haven't changed, they haven't washed. It's that they're frightened of falling, perhaps, so that they don't mobilise enough. There's all sorts of self-neglect, but most common is probably the not eating and drinking. Hydration is a big issue.
Right, right. Yeah, my husband's father is now, how old is he? I think he's 87, and his wife just passed away a couple of weeks ago. Well, maybe it's getting to be 3 weeks ago now. And luckily, his daughter is a nurse, and she came home to see him and recognized that he needed hydration, so she had IVs, weekly IVs, and he's doing so much better. He's
Yeah,
doing so much better. But if they take that away, because he's had a lot of gastric reflux, there's these little things, and then they won't
yeah,
eat or they won't drink, and
yeah.
then they get into a feedback loop, right?
Oh, totally.
Mm-hmm.
The other big thing is UTIs. So many of the clients have a
Oh, yes.
UTI, and it happens as you get older, and that can cause cognitive impairment, confusion, dehydration. It's a real vicious cycle, and quite often people aren't educated about it. They don't know that's what may be happening with their relative.
That's right. Or even the people themselves don't know that that's
Oh,
what's
yeah.
happening to them.
Yeah, when
Yeah,
I first
right.
set it up, I thought that we would be getting referrals from people themselves. I thought that that's how we'd market it and that people would see they had a need, but it's totally not that. We very rarely get somebody identifying that they themselves need help. Most of the time, it's crisis point, which is sad. Most of the time, it is they've been financially abused, maybe by a family member, someone's taken money that shouldn't have done. We've even had situations where houses have been sold and without the person getting the money for it, and they've ended up in a social care setting. So quite often they don't realise they're being abused, or they're too ashamed to say that they're being abused. We had one client who was so sad. He was living with a young girl who was it had been his friend's daughter. His friend had died. The daughter had moved in with him. She was a drug addict. They said it was a crack house, which we thought was an exaggeration, but going in, there were needles, there were rats on the side. And I said to him, we can help you, but we have to get her out of the property first. That's a non-negotiable. We can't help you while she's here because she's stealing from you, and anything we put in place, she'll take. And he was so sad. He just said to me, I would rather have the drama than be on my own. And I said, but we can help you. And he said, I can't do it. I'd rather have her and all the drama, even though every day I wake up thinking, God, this is hell, than be on my own. So he wouldn't take our help, which was, I just put my hand on him and just said, when you're ready, I'm here. Because I couldn't, in that situation, I couldn't do anything. He wouldn't let me. But that's another big issue, is isolation. Social isolation is huge, and that's what leads people to this vulnerable state where someone is going to take advantage because they don't have the community anymore that they used to have. So yeah, it's
right. So the churches aren't, they're not going to the churches anymore for those communities, right?
Yeah, it's completely disbanded. I think COVID escalated it. COVID made things a million times worse, and people that perhaps would have still been going out became so fearful that they stopped going out. And then at the end of lockdown, or whatever you want to call it, they were still so much in fear. It had been so much now a part of their lives that they just haven't ever gone back out again. So I don't know what the statistics are for church attendance, but I know certainly locally here they've closed down some of the churches because people have just stopped going. And I think that's so sad, because a community exists where you've got the young and the old together, and it works. When you disband that, you end up with people in isolation, and that's when dementia becomes so fast because they haven't got the contact. So yeah, it's a huge issue.
So do you have any clergy do you work with any clergy?
So we do have some referrals from churches, yeah. We're trying to get in contact with, I can't remember the name of them, but there is a collective of, they call themselves saints, I think, or something similar to that, where they focus on older people within the Church of England. So we're trying to make the connections there, because actually we can help and we can support those people that they identify as in need. But yes, definitely that's an area where we really want to be involved. We've just started to spread out into another area regionally across the southeast. So in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, they're very proactive about ageing well. So they have excellent ties with the local churches, the communities. It all pulls together and it works. So we're really thrilled to be part of that community. West Sussex, which is where we are now, we spread all across the southeast. They're brilliant. The social workers care, they're passionate, but the funding is so limited that there's not that. They don't have coordinators that go out and encourage the churches and the community, whereas they do in Bournemouth. So it's actually taking what works, and as a company, we can then say to the local authorities, look, this works in this area, why don't you try that here? For a little bit of extra funding, you can then see all these benefits of bringing people back into the community. So yeah, it's one of my missions.
Well, that's a smart way to do it. That, doing a pilot, it's like doing a pilot study and then, broadening it out, instead of like they did with the pandemic, where they just told everybody this works and we're going to do it with everybody without ever trying it on a small population. That's just not how you do things. It's not how you change anything. You always start with a pilot. And
absolutely.
It's seldom done.
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm really passionate about this. I can see it's making a difference. And my mission is to get this national. And I think part of that is advocacy. I have a voice. I am a solicitor. I have a legal background, and therefore I am able to go into local authorities and government and say, this works. Let me help you. Obviously we've got the election coming up tomorrow. So I don't know who's going to be in power, but either way, social care is high on the agenda because it's such a problem and it's only going to get worse. So I feel like actually I'm really well placed to be a voice and to say, this is what works. Do this. So, yeah.
So, how did you develop an interest in this field? Because you were a lawyer and now you're helping vulnerable and the elderly. What drives this passion to work with them?
I don't know if it's everybody, but ever since I was little, I had just had this feeling that I was going to make a difference. I was going to change the world. And so I thought when I was about 11, I thought, okay, law, that's going to give me a voice. I might be able to help people. I took a long route round, but I became a lawyer. I qualified. I did a little bit of human rights law, and I worked for government doing reports, but it was just admin. It was bureaucracy. It was frustrating. I ended up getting really frustrated thinking this isn't changing anything. I then had my first two children who are 24 and 23 now, so they're a year apart. And I thought, well, this is the end of my journey. I've done all this work. And now what? So I went on to be a solicitor thinking maybe I could do something. I started doing family law and quickly developed a specialism with working with divorced women whose husbands had gone off with someone younger. And to see the journey of empowerment from feeling broken, feeling like they couldn't do it without that husband, to actually working out, I can do this, I can get a job, I can look after myself, I can make sure I'm eating the right food. That for me was really empowering, and I thought, okay, maybe there is something here. I did that for a number of years, and then we had our youngest daughter who is profoundly deaf, and I had to make a bit of a lifestyle change then. I couldn't really deal with the gritty children issues and the fighting in court. So I changed to dealing with elderly clients and bereaved families and dealing with the law around that. And I came across a couple of really horrific cases of financial abuse that were so shocking. Hundreds of thousands of pounds taken from really vulnerable people, and it made me
Well,
so
my
cross.
father lost $250,000 when he was
Really?
elderly. In fact, when I showed up, I was told by my sister and brother to come out there because dad was getting taken advantage of. And when I came in the door, he was on the telephone and I could hear him saying, "Oh, yes, I'm fine. Oh, I just got out of the hospital yesterday. I had a stroke. Oh, yeah, I'm doing okay." And I thought, who's he talking to?
Yeah.
So then I went in the office and I said, "Who are you talking to, Dad?" Oh, well, it was this guy from this investment company. So he let me say hello to him. And I said, "My father's just got out of the hospital and I'd rather that you didn't call." So, but I didn't want to embarrass my dad because he had this relationship with them.
Yeah.
But they'd taken $250,000 in
Oh my
very small
goodness.
amounts every month from his credit card.
Awful.
Told him that they were going to get a good return. And, when he was young, he was very good financially. He
Yeah.
made lots of money on his own as an entrepreneur, but then he had little TIAs, little strokes. And so
Yeah.
it was getting more and more difficult for him to understand, man, they just took advantage of him. And when we looked to find out where they were from Kuwait, and there was nothing we could do.
That's awful. It's
Yeah. So
shocking.
these people, yeah, there's so much fraud, huh?
And that's with a loving family involved. So, I mean, you can imagine what happens when there's no one picks up on it. And that's what I found. It made me so angry that people had the nerve to do this. And in the cases that I dealt with, it was people that had befriended them. They'd gone in and pretended to care, and taken hundreds of thousands of pounds and tried to change the will. So that just made me think there has got to be an alternative. People can't afford a solicitor or a lawyer at $300 an hour, £300 an hour. They can't afford that for somebody to manage their finances for them, and yet they can't do it themselves sometimes. So I just thought there's got to be an alternative where you can have someone that is reliable, professional, insured, regulated, and affordable, and so that anybody can access this. And that's what I set out as my mission, was there's a problem here, there needs to be a solution, and I can be part of that solution. So that's how
Now, how
it
did you
came to be.
manage, though, to offer that and afford to offer that without uh, taking what you need for payment?
So we are really fortunate in the UK that we have a benefit system that once you reach 65 actually is quite accessible. Prior to retirement, it's really difficult to get the benefits. It's a horrendous situation, and we do have clients that are younger than retirement age, and it's a real fight to get them benefits. But once they reach retirement age, there is in fact a very good benefit that people can have. And so we are able to tap into that and get funding to pay for our services. And where they're under pension age, the local authority will fund us because they believe in what we're doing, and they can see that it makes such a difference because it's keeping people out of hospital, it's keeping people out of the care homes, it's actually making people have a better life. So we're really fortunate in that we've managed to get the funding. So most of the time, people are better off being with us than they would be not. Bit of a no-brainer.
So say you show up at someone's house, or someone who's coming from your company shows up at the house. What is the next step once you have that person with you? And what does it mean that they're with you? So
So
what are the next steps that happen?
So what we would do is we talk to them about what we can offer. We'd say to them, look, we are a paid for service, but we will get the funding for you if we can. We will assess what finances they've got and apply to the local authority for funding for care if they need it, etc. We talk about prioritize with the priorities. So what's urgent? What's now that you need? We can focus on the bigger things later, but right now, do you need food? Do you need clothing? Do you need care? What's happening with all your bills? Have you got people turning up, bailiffs turning up at the door because you haven't paid your bills? Those are the kind of, right, we'll focus on these, and then we will have a team in place that regularly ring you, come round, see you, however much we need to, and then we'll start to work through the backlog of other stuff as well. And as I say, sometimes it's crisis, sometimes the property is not habitable, and so it will be, right, we need to get clearance in, we need to get fumigators in, we need to get deep clean, and we need to organise new furniture and things. But yeah, so the first step really is to get them on board, to get them to agree to us helping them, and then we go from there.
Is that, how do you manage to get them to accept your help?
I think, again, this is where it comes down to crisis. Quite often they are in crisis, and the local authority have said, if you don't accept help, then the next stage is a care home. So I think quite often social services have done our job for us in that way. They've actually already told them, if you don't accept this support, then we can't control what happens next.
And what does happen next
So
if
two
they don't
options.
accept it?
Yeah. Court of protection. I don't know if you've got something similar where you are, but it basically means where somebody has lost the capacity to make decisions and is not looking after themselves, then a court will appoint somebody to deal with it. And at that point, that person loses any access to their finances, any access to making decisions. It's all taken away from them. So we would rather not do that. We would rather support them while they still have capacity. And then when they lose it, we're still in place to support. That will happen on the legal front. In terms of the physical front, if they're self-neglecting and environmental health are involved, then they're removed from the property and they're placed into a social care home, which may not be very nice. So those are the kind of, if you don't want support, then you're going to reach this point and it will be taken away from you.
So is there, so there's a caseworker for each person that you bring in, I imagine. And then
Yes.
are there a number of people, there's a number of people who work under the caseworker to help.
Yes.
So there's a community right there. There's a community right there for each person.
Yes. Yeah. And they love our staff, our team love their clients. They really genuinely love them. And it's so lovely to see that nurturing, because quite a lot of my team are young. But to see the care.
How do you find them? Where do you find this team?
Do you know, amazingly, it tends to be word of mouth. People know that it's a great place to work, so they will tell their friends. We haven't really had to advertise for recruitment. We get CVs in all the time. People saying, I'd really like to work for you. A lot of the social workers say, can we come and work for you? And I've even had some people from the bank say, I'd quite like to work for you. So, yeah, we don't seem to have a shortage of people wanting to work with us.
Now, why do you think that is?
I think it's fulfilling. So what you're doing is fulfilling. You're actually making a difference. I think I'm really strong in why we do what we do. And so everybody in the team knows this is why we do it. They all know that it's about helping people and supporting people. So you attract those kind of people that want to make a difference, and they feel part of it. It's exciting. It's growing. It's, every time we create a new team, there's an excitement, there's a buzz because they're part of this. And I think with the younger ones, I'm able to say to them, look, if you're interested in finance, then stick with us because there will be a head of finance at some point. The teams are growing. If you want to learn benefits, we'll train you on it, and you can then be head of benefits at some point. If you want to be regional, we can train you so that when we open different regions, you can go out and be the trainer. So there's opportunities there for younger people to actually shape their career. So I think that's quite exciting as well.
Mm-hmm. How long has this been going on, Enable? When did this
4
company
years.
get formed? 3 years. Oh,
So,
geez, that's
yeah,
fast.
yeah, it's grown quickly.
It is. So what do you think of that there's a niche here for you? What do you think has happened in society that they need you?
I think it's the social care crisis. I think it's the disbanding of communities. It's an aging population. People are living longer. COVID accelerated everything. And I think there is just this it's so unfair in society. If you stick with your insurer or you stick with your utility company, you're going to be penalised. You're going to end up paying more. But the people that can't shop around, that can't use the internet to find the best deals, are the vulnerable and the elderly. So they're getting a raw deal here on every count. They can't go into the banks anymore and meet the person that used to know them personally. They lose their PIN numbers. They can't work the automated telephone system. There is so much set against them. And then when you combine that with the lack of funding, lack of support, breakdown in families, we've got people on the poverty line who are then stealing from their elders. I don't condone it at all, but there is a reason why it's on the increase, because they see this as being an opportunity, or they maybe think they're entitled. Mum would have wanted me to have it, or whatever. I think there's just a perfect storm where there is such a crisis across the world. It's not just in the UK; it's everywhere, and this really does need addressing.
What do you think has to be? What would be a step towards healing this trouble that we have in our society now of not taking care of one another?
Community is a big one.
Community.
Isolation counts for a massive amount of our cases. They feel alone. They feel invisible. I think community is massive because there wouldn't be such a need for us if there was a community. If you had somebody that was part of a church and they were falling behind with things and neglecting, the church would rally round, look after them. We don't seem to have that now. People move away from their parents. They don't live locally. I'm not making a judgment on that. It just happens to be where we're at. But if we were to bring back community where we were looking after each other, then there wouldn't be such a need for us, and there wouldn't be such a crisis in terms of the budgets and everything else. I think that's one of the things we could be doing.
That's for sure. I have those thoughts. I'm not home very much anymore. My kids are grown. They're married. They have children of their own. So my husband and I aren't home very much. But when we go home now, since the pandemic, the street doesn't seem as open. When I walk down the street, people aren't as friendly and to say hello. Something has definitely changed, and some people think it's the city that we live in, but I wonder if it isn't much more widespread than that people are more suspicious of one another, and now so they don't just spontaneously smile and say hello.
Yeah,
And
that's very
that
true.
causes isolation, right?
It's broken.
Because even if you live alone, if you say hello to someone, if you go outside for a walk and say hello to 5 people, that's something.
Yeah.
That's enough sometimes in a day to think that you have people that you have reached out to and maybe improved their day just by saying hello to them, right?
Totally. Yeah, totally. And touch. Some people haven't been touched. I can't remember what the statistic was, but it's like something like 11 months. You know, not to have been touched by another human being, not to have had someone just tap you on the shoulder or put a hand on you or
You bet.
squeeze your hand. Can you imagine what that must feel like? Not to have had
It,
anybody have that contact with
yeah,
anybody. It's just wrong. We're not Humans aren't
yeah,
made to be like that. We're made to be in community, and that's tragic.
yeah. We're made to bump up against each other to find out how we feel.
Yeah,
And
we are.
it seems to be, it's in communication too with someone else that you find what's it, what maybe you're thinking about that you haven't expressed.
Yeah,
So all of those things would be still inside. So that would cause physical trouble as well as psychological trouble.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's being seen, being heard, reflecting back on your thoughts. There's so much that's just not there anymore, and it is tragic. But what I find interesting is that we always think of the elderly. Well, that's us. We are going to be elderly if we make it that far. It's going to happen to all of us. So it's not something we can say is not going to happen to us, because it will.
Yeah. And lots of people now they have tech jobs where you don't have to go into work. Someone who still works in a restaurant has to serve people, so they see people every day. But uh, more and more people are working from home as well, so they don't even have to go into work. They don't have to go into work, and they work by themselves at home and don't see anybody. It's more likely, I guess, that you would stop taking care of yourself then, because you're not going to be seen by anyone. All you are is a face on a
Yeah,
screen. Yeah, that's isolating itself. Although, I feel when I do these podcasts, I like doing these podcasts. It's one-on-one communication. I like it. I think that I do better that way than in large groups of people. So for me, it's good. But then when I get off the screen, I have a husband, right? I
yeah,
have I have children. So it's not enough. It's something, but it's not enough. You have to have these in-person community, just so you can reflect on who you are and what you have to offer.
you absolutely do. It's so important, and the difference it makes for some of our clients, even just ringing them regularly, is tremendous.
Right. Yeah, so how often do you ring them?
Every week, sometimes more than that. Some of them are on the phone every day. It just depends on what they need.
Mm-hmm. And so then, if they say they come to you and they're out of their house, how soon can they be back in their house? And in the meantime, if they're a hoarder, do you clean up the house? What do you do?
Yeah, so we tend to go into the property. If it's a hoarding situation, we'll go in and we will look at anything that may be valuable that we need to salvage. And then once we're sure that we've got everything that's personal to them, that they want to keep, then we'll go and get a clearance in to clear the rest of the stuff. We won't do all of that, although we have done on some occasions for speed. But yeah, it depends on how long, it depends on how ill they are. Because obviously, if they've been in hospital and they're not very well, then they need to recover before they can come home. Sometimes they need to go for a little bit of respite just to get their strength up. And also, one of the things we have to do is to source a carer. Quite often it's a living carer, so we will interview people and get them in place, make sure that we get the right fit. And that's quite important to us as well.
So you're working specifically with home care.
Yes, yeah. We have some fantastic agencies that we work with. Agencies that will go the extra mile, ones that will let us know if they think something isn't right, because they know the clients, they're seeing them daily, and if they sense their baseline is off, it's so important that we know straight away, because it could just be a UTI. We could just get a dip test, get them on antibiotics, and they improve, the baseline comes back up, or it could be more serious. So using care agencies that totally care, go above and beyond is key for what we do. And then the living care, again, sourcing those carers, interviewing them, making sure that they're cared for as well, making sure that their needs are met, because obviously we want them to be well nourished and looked after so that they can care for our clients. So it's all part of a team.
So my husband was a clinical psychologist for a long time, and at one point he'd been seeing a woman, a borderline woman, and her family for quite a long time, and he thought maybe she could have massages, and I was a massage therapist. So I went to her house to give her massages, and they were hoarders. It was the two daughters and the mother that all lived together. And she used to buy clothing online to sell, but she just had racks and racks
Yeah,
of clothing there too, because the selling part didn't
didn't happen.
materialize very often, right? And the first day I set up my massage table, and there's so much stuff in there that I had a hard time getting her to navigate her way to the table. There were so many distractions, I think, that it was, so I had to be very patient. I think it took me at least a half an hour to get her over to the table so that I could have her lie down so I could do the treatment on her. And if you opened a drawer, there would be um, 2 cans of tuna, a passport,
Yeah,
and rubber bands or something. So you never knew when you opened something whether it would have something vitally important or
yeah,
absolutely not important at all. So you had to look through everything.
yeah.
Yeah.
We've definitely been in that
So
situation before.
I just have that one experience that I
Yeah.
have, and so I kind of know what you mean when you go into a place. It's a big job.
It's a huge job, and part of it is also finding out who they were, who they are. So that's also part of it, what their interests are. It's also making sure you get everything. So, like you say, I had one house where I think we removed 20 something tons of contents from it, and she would write letters to people. I need, I'm looking after my elderly mother, and I need a Hoover, or I need a microwave. So she had all this brand new stuff that was 20 years been in a box, useless to anybody.
Oh, yeah.
She was a proper hoarder, loads of letters and things. But and she would go into charity shops and just buy tons. She would take things out of other people's skips. It was a nightmare. And in her lounge, I'll never forget, the sofa was really soiled and disgusting. And I lifted it up, and there was a Chinese takeaway menu, and then there was like an incontinence pad that had been used, and underneath that was a will. Just
What?
unbelievable. I was like,
Yeah,
that's a will.
yeah.
That's a valid will. It's signed. It's got witnesses. That's a valid legal document. Under the cushion it was crazy. That house was absolutely crazy. It was kind
Yeah.
of just a shock to see how people were living. But yeah,
And what about the houses themselves? Are these houses that are dilapidated, or are they?
yeah,
I mean, sometimes I guess they are
yeah.
dilapidated, but I'm just wondering if the houses have anything to do with their trouble in life.
The pattern that I see with most of it, and obviously your husband will know better than I do with this, but it seems to be elderly children who never leave home, who look after their parents or are mummied by their parents, and don't make the break. So that when those parents die, they get stuck. It's like time stops. So many of my cases where I go in and there's hoarding and there's neglect is because they're an elderly child that has never made that break, never been independent. And it's tragic because that's such a waste of life. And so I'm with my children. You move out as soon as you can, please, because I don't want that situation where they are still really dependent on me in their 40s and 50s. That's just not right. So I don't know if that's just something that we've noted or if there is actually something psychological there, but definitely that seems to be the pattern is an elderly child who's looked after their parents and the parents have died and they've just stayed.
How much of your time do you spend being a lawyer, and how much of your time do you spend being a director?
I'd like to say something clever like I'm always a lawyer, but I would say At the moment, I'm doing 2 days as a lawyer, and the rest of the time is working in Enable, which is actually quite difficult to juggle, because I just end up working long hours in both. but, but I do love what I do. So although people say, "Oh, you're a workaholic," I probably am, but I love what I do. So there's an enjoyment in there. It's not like I'm stressed and I'm hating every minute and watching the clock. I'm not. I love what I do. I get absorbed in what I do, and I like making a difference. So, yeah, quick answer, probably 2, 3 days either way.
Now, do you work at a different place when you work at Enable? You go to a law firm and you work there?
Yeah, well, we've actually got the same building, so it makes it really easy. So I
Oh,
literally just
good.
walk through a different door to get to Enable. We were in just one room, and then where Enable just kept growing and growing, we had to move offices anyway with the law firm. So we thought, well, we'll just get a big enough office that we could put Enable in. But we're already up to 20 staff, so I think we're probably going to have to move somewhere else before too long, or get another
Mhm.
building nearby. So yeah.
So you must have been inspired to start this because there was definitely a need there that you're filling. Otherwise, it wouldn't have grown like it is, right? So it was a real calling.
I feel like it was. As I said, I've always felt like there is something I should be doing, and this feels like it. I did the family law, I did the bereaved law, and that all felt good, but not like I was actually making a massive difference. I want to make a difference on a large scale. I feel with this is where I'm making a difference, and I'm affecting the lives of lots of people for the best, for better. So this is really scratching my itch.
Yes, and it's good for the listeners to hear this because, well, this is happening everywhere. And so this kind of business, if it's taken off and is working so well, then this opportunity is there for other people in other parts of the world as well.
Definitely, and I think that's one of my missions. Is once it's national here, I would love to be able to go around the world and advise people. Look, this works. Set this up, because I just think everybody should have access to it. We need to stop the abuse of elderly people. It needs to stop the financial abuse, and if we've got more people doing what we're doing, it's going to mean that there's less opportunity for people to take advantage of older people. So yeah.
Yes, and I think my sister was already there. My sister relocated, she's a palliative care nurse, from the mainland to the island where my dad was living, within walking distance of his house.
Mm,
My other sister was there, she was a pharmacist, and my brother was there, he's a notary. So, there was my dad's girlfriend wasn't living with him. And so after that, she began living with
yeah.
him more because they needed to keep an eye on each
Yeah.
other. They were both, getting old. She was a little bit younger than him, but not a lot younger. So, it was that was helpful that way. But she's also very respectful. So she wouldn't have interfered as well. Even being in the same house, you never know if two elderly people are there, what's happening to one elderly person that the other one doesn't even know. So community is so important, and
Community
to
is,
ask hard questions, right? And to ask hard
yeah,
questions.
yeah, to be able to say, that that girlfriend you've got in Nigeria. Okay, you may be thinking that you're sending money out to her family, etc., but can we have a chat about this? Maybe we could meet her. Maybe we could have a chat with her next time. That kind of thing. I found when I was as a lawyer that I had quite a few older men who was so independent. They'd led fantastic careers. They'd managed all their finances, and they were embarrassed that they'd been taken for a
Yeah.
ride.
Yes.
They were embarrassed that their ego had been flattered by what they thought was a woman that was attracted to them, or that this investment opportunity of investing in diamonds turned out not to be real. And so I think there was that they didn't want to have to tell their children. So I had several of them come in to see me, and they were honest with me because they felt they could be, because I'm a lawyer. And I guess I'm also quite empathetic, so I didn't judge them. I didn't say you're an idiot. I just said, gosh, anybody would have fallen for that. How can we help? So I think there is also a need for a professional person to be available. So if they don't feel they can talk to the family, that there is an option that they could talk to someone else, and that person will ask the right questions.
Has any of the issues that are plaguing our societies come into your work with feminism and gender ideologies? And has that come into your work at all?
Not really. I think we're quite
Oh,
sheltered
that's
in that.
good.
I mean, we have.
No wonder you like it.
I love it. And we have, I guess, because a lot of our clients are older, there doesn't tend to be the issues that the younger people have. Maybe that will change as we move to different regions. Again, it could be regional, but certainly I haven't found that to be an issue. I think we're just really blessed to have the team that we have and to have the strong belief in what we do.
So what do you have any advice for other women who are trying to pursue higher levels of responsibility or in their personal lives, in careers or their professional lives?
I think it's really difficult as a woman. Obviously, I've been in the legal profession for many years. I still find now when I go into situations with other solicitors, perhaps London solicitors, that there is definitely a kind of, what do you know? And I think also because I can look young, they assume that I don't have any experience or authority. But I think the more you believe in yourself, the more you know what it is that you want to achieve, the stronger you are in your voice. And you just have to think, I know I'm right in what I'm saying, and I know I have a voice, so I'm not going to be put off or intimidated by the other people in the room. The more you do it, it's like a practice. The more you do it, the more you believe it, and the more you become comfortable in doing it. So I think that's really important. I would say for anybody thinking about setting up a business, especially women, why are you doing it? That's really important. If you're just doing it to make money, it's probably not going to be that passionate about it, and that's not going to come across. If you're doing it because you see a need and because it's something that you believe in, it'll work because that comes across. So I think it's really important when people are thinking about a business to work out why. What need is it that you are meeting? Because if there isn't a need, it's not going to succeed. And if you're not strong about why you're doing it, it's not going to succeed. So I think that's really important. That would be advice that I would give to anybody. And really knowing yourself and standing firm in yourself and thinking, no, I know what I'm saying, I know what I'm doing, I'm professional, I'm qualified, or whatever it is that you're wanting to do, and not being intimidated.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's good advice. I think not just women, but women are, that's that's where I sit. So that's what I
Yeah,
know about.
yeah,
We may tend to decide that what we want isn't that important. But we know that when we have children, that we think each of our children are important and that they each have a responsibility to live out their lives and to fill whatever niches their particular talents show them. We have the same responsibility to
yeah.
ourselves. Yeah,
I
I agree
totally
with that.
agree.
And that it's up to us to be on our side and to help our whatever it is that we want to do to fulfill it and to take advantage of the opportunities that come our way.
I
Yeah.
totally agree. And I also think don't try and fit in to be a man. If
No.
you are in a man's world, still be yourself, still be strong in your passions, your emotions. It's okay to feel. And more now, I think the men are trying to be a bit more feeling and trying to get in touch with their emotions because they see, well, actually, you read that room really quickly. How did you do that? And actually, that's a superpower that we have. Quite often we can read the room because we have read people for years. We've had to read the situation. So I think, particularly when I was younger, I was like, I have to be like the men that I see doing this and running a business. I have to act like them. No, you don't have to act like them. You act like you. You've got your gifts, you've got your personality, you've got your strengths. It's really important that you embrace those and don't try and fit in to be something that you aren't, because actually you've got superpowers. So that I believe that quite strongly.
Yeah, well, I think men, they've got their powers, they've got their superpowers. Uh, ours aren't the same as theirs; they're different, but just as meaningful in a different way.
Yeah.
And the more we're true to that, the more rounded all of our enterprises will be, because the men will be doing what they do best, and the women will be doing what they do best, and those two things have always gone together. So I think that's very good. How do you balance your professional life with motherhood?
That's a tricky one, isn't it? Mum guilt.
It is.
I think you feel mum guilt from the minute you find out you're pregnant. Should I be eating that? Is it okay to do this? And then when they move out, you're thinking, have I rung them enough? Have I been in touch this week? Are they okay? What if they make a bad decision? That's my fault. If they make a bad decision, that's because I didn't teach them that properly. So I think it's like, it's always going to be there. But I think you have to focus on the positives, don't you? And think, you know what, they're lovely children. I'm so proud of them all. They're all so unique, and they're all such good communicators. I love the fact that they are enjoying life. And yes, they may struggle from time to time with things, but I'm really proud of the way they deal with things. In terms of my managing being a mum and working, I've probably, in the eyes of a lot of people, failed. I think I love my children to bits, but I have been a working mum, and sometimes you read things and you think, oh gosh, should I have done that? But then I have invested time with them one to one. I love spending time with them, and we have amazing breaks where we try and do stuff creatively together. We still all go on holiday together, and they're in their 20s, the older ones. It's a family. We have lots of family meals. They come back and stay with us for weeks. It's a lovely environment that we've got, and I'm really proud of that. So when I've got family time, I'm family focused. But when I've not got family time, I'm massively in the office working, creating, and enjoying it. So I think it's a balance, isn't it? And I find it works as well knowing that my mum, like you, is praying for me and my children. And, whenever there's anything difficult, she'll say, oh, well, her friend and her were praying about that. And I've just got this for you. And it's so lovely to have that, actually, if we can do that for our children, that's a real blessing as well. Right, okay, yes,
It is,
spending time with
yeah.
us is, but also knowing that we're thinking of them and that we're focusing on them and praying for them is also massive.
Yeah. And it's really helpful to me to be the one who's praying. It's
Yeah,
very helpful to me. So I think if it's helpful to me, it may be helpful to them as well.
definitely will be. Definitely. To know
Yeah.
that you are doing that is, I think that's lovely.
Yeah, I think so. They're going to come and stay with me. So that'll be fun. So then we can do some prayers together.
So
And that'll
lovely.
be fun. That'll be fun. That's for sure. So do you think that we need more homes for the elderly, or how do you think we should be dealing with, because the way things are going, especially with an aging population, there's more and more need for care for the elderly. Do you think that's can be done in an institution, or does that have to be done in a different way?
I think it has to be done in a different way. We're really fortunate in the southeast that we have one of the first dementia villages. So I think there are a lot of lessons we can learn from other cultures and other countries who seem to have got it right, where you've got villages so that people with dementia can still go to the cinema or go to the ice cream shop or go to the bike shop, do repairs that they would have done. But although people working in those shops are trained carers, but also there's other societies where they've got students living with the elderly people, so they get a discount on the rent if they look after the elderly person. Works brilliantly, because the elderly person is then like, well, this is great. I'm, down with the kids. I'm listening to their music. Their friends come around. I'm socializing. So I think there's a lot more we could be doing that we're not doing yet. There's
Yes,
a
I
lot
like
of
that idea of
progress.
the young living with them. The young, where have
Definitely.
you seen that?
I
Where
think
have you
it's in
seen that?
Sweden.
Is that
I think
in
it's in
Sweden?
Sweden.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. That's not
Um,
surprising that it would start there.
yeah, really proactive. But what they're seeing is such an incredible change in the elderly people, because they feel part of something and they're connected again. There was a study about looking after something. So it was, they put a plant in care homes and said to the elderly people, right, you were to look after that plant. And giving them that responsibility of nurturing the plant and looking after it actually improved their cognitive abilities. So there is something in giving that person a purpose still. My mother-in-law has Alzheimer's and was getting worse and worse at home. It was really sad. And she kept asking us, do you want a cup of tea? And we would say no, because she would invariably not be able to make it. She'd forget, she'd get halfway there, whatever. And then I realised she needs to do this. She wants to make a cup of tea. She's always cared for the family. She's always nurtured. She wants to do it. So I'm going to say yes. And it doesn't matter if she forgets. It doesn't matter if she puts salt in. It doesn't matter if it's cold. The act of her offering it and going to make it really helps her. And it changed her mood significantly. So instead of her being antagonistic and angry, which is what she'd become, she actually felt happy that she was going to be able to make a cup of tea. So I think sometimes just something simple like that, by giving somebody a purpose and saying, we'd like you to look after this, can really make a difference. So I think that's why it works in Sweden. Having a younger person living with them, they feel like, oh, I could make them a cup of tea, or I can make their bed, or I can do their laundry for them. It gives them a purpose, and that keeps them cognitively much better than if we let people just sit in a chair in a care home watching a TV screen that they can't hear. So
Yeah.
I think definitely there needs to be a
Yeah. When
change.
my mom was old, I really liked watching her sweep the floor because she liked to sweep the floor. And I used to wonder, because I used to take care of elderly people when I was in my 20s. I'd go to different people's houses, and I liked doing that. My grandmother was the matron in an old folks home, so I spent
Oh,
time with
wow.
elderly people when I was a little
Yeah,
kid. So I wasn't afraid of the elderly, which
yeah,
is really helpful when you put kids with elderly, then
yes,
they're not afraid of them
definitely.
anymore. And that's a big deal, because
It really
I think
is.
when you haven't seen them, you don't know exactly how resilient they are or anything, so you're a lot less likely to engage with them. So yeah, there's good things that the young can do with the elderly.
Totally.
When my mom had dementia, she'd sweep the floor, and then she'd get to a point where, say, there were a pair of shoes under a chair, and she would just stop there. She'd stop, so you'd go over and you move the shoes, and then she'd sweep some more. And so it was so fun to be able to do an activity with her, making pie dough. She was always really good at making pie dough.
Yeah,
She made wonderful pies, but then she couldn't do it anymore. So if I would mix the ingredients, she would knead the dough, and roll it, and then give her the roller, pat it out. She'd roll it just like she had always perfectly
yeah,
done it, and it was so interesting to see where she had lost the ability. But then if I could overcome that little hump, then off she would go again. And that would bring me great joy, to be with her in those moments. It was memorable. It was very memorable.
totally is. It's muscle memory. I know there was an analogy of the brain with dementia is like a bookshelf, and you've got all the books on the top all the way down to the bottom. And when you've got dementia, it starts shaking. And the ones on the top memories are the ones that are going to go first. But the core memories at the bottom are going to stay there. So even though they may not remember your name, they may not necessarily remember your face, the feeling that you give them when you spend time with them, they will recognise that as familiar. So I think that's really stuck with me as well, is actually, even if somebody that you love dearly says, who are you? Do I know you, dear? Have you got children? There's a part of them that is recognising you as familiar. And so spending time with people, even when they can't remember you, is really important, and hanging on to those memories that you did with them. So your mum remembered muscle memory that she could sweep the floor.
Mm-hmm.
That was still there.
Yeah.
I know with music is stored in 5 different parts of the brain, as far as I know. And it means that it's one of the last things to go. So you will find that people who can't speak can still sing. They'll still sing their childhood songs. So helping someone transition from getting changed into a bath could have been a real nightmare and a real struggle. But if you sing with them, the brain remembers the song, feels familiar, they'll sing, and you can get them into the bath. There is so much out there now in terms of what we're learning about the brain and how to help people that it's exciting. But bureaucracy takes so long to get these things through. You know, if Enable is as successful as I want it to be, then I would love to be able to open dementia villages where we really look at these things and we look at all the different ways that we can involve people and keep them with us for as long as possible cognitively.
Yeah, that's for sure.